is our June 27, 2019 meeting. It's actually past 4:30 and tonight we'll have the public hearing for the fiscal year 2019-2020 budget. That'll be in accordance with North Carolina General Statute 159-12B. And any person who wishes to be heard on the Vaya Health proposed budget for fiscal year 2019-2020 is invited to share input at this time, and we'll do that under public comment. Is that right? That's right. Okay. All right. Roll call. Nancy Baker.
Here.
Ronnie Beal.
Here.
Patrick Bennecourt. Gary Blevins.
Here.
Jack Kahn.
Here.
Ira Dove.
Here.
Jeannie Duncan. I have Jeff X Proxy.
He's in Switzerland.
Oh,
Don't feel
yeah. Jim Holland.
Here. Is it midnight there yet?
Billy Kennedy.
I have a proxy.
Okay. Kevin King. Okay. Paige Snell. I have a proxy. Pat McGinnis.
Here.
Mike Morris. Connie Orr. Mars Pittman. Steve Smith.
I think Steve was trying to reach us on the phone earlier.
Okay.
I don't know, we sent him the call-in number, so
Okay.
will something pop up what he tries to get in?
It will tell us that he's waiting in the lobby of the Teams app.
All right. Will Wakefield.
Here.
Ashley Wooten. And Ashley Fair.
Yep.
All right, we have a quorum. Has everyone had a chance to review the agenda and the prior?
Is now joining.
Hello there.
Quick crowd, quick crowd.
Who is now on the phone with us? Hello?
Hey, Rick.
Hello.
Richard.
Patrick?
Patrick Bedford.
Okay. Hey, Patrick.
Aye.
Has everyone had a chance to review the agenda and the minutes from our last meeting?
Yes.
Okay. If you have, is there a motion to approve the agenda and the minutes from our last meeting?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, Pat, second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
All right, at this time, public comment. We have a...
Just that many times.
All right, Mary Short.
Yes, hi. I don't have public comment on the budget. I don't know if anyone else had public comment on the budget. They should go before me. But I have public comment otherwise.
Just, you go ahead.
Okay. Hello, Mary Short, Alexander County. Katie Short, Alexander County. I didn't bring my tripod, so I'm going to lay this camera down, which is going to make people watching it on YouTube angry. But such is life. So, there are a couple things that I want to address to the board. And the first thing I want to address to the board has to do with the state auditor's report from May of 2019. And that auditor's report on page 4 discusses the fact that LME MCOs are not submitting staff incident reports. Staff incident reports are level 1 incidents, and they are to document when staff does not work. And because the state isn't receiving this encounter data, it's so funny. The auditor states the department was unable to provide evidence that it obtained all LMEMCO staff incident reports in a timely manner. Staff incident reports are quarterly reports from LMEMCOs that contain all incidents in which providers failed to ensure adequate staff was available to provide services. Well, that seems really important. Oh yeah, search your memories. You know I have talked to you about this before. And the fact that you all have continually denied relatives and guardians the opportunity to provide paid supports. In fact, they request that because there is not adequate staff available to provide services. Anyway, so the auditor goes on to say, without staff incident reports, the department doesn't know whether providers have sufficient staff to provide quality services to members. So shame on all of you, meaning you all and the other LMEMCOs. But I am heartened by the fact that Disability Scoop had an article May 6th wherein they discussed Senator Casey's letter to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services Office of Inspector General. And the Office of Inspector General has opened an investigation. Are managed care providers wrongly denying services to people with disabilities? It is stunning, the information that Senator Casey was able to compile and send to the Office of Inspector General, who then opened an ongoing investigation. It really is stunning. I found it sort of funny that one of those companies was Centene. Some of you involved in Medicaid transformation might be familiar with that company's name. Let's see, so the Office of Inspector General is going to, have MCOs knowingly denied care to enrollees that should have been covered. Are people enrolled in Medicaid MCOs able to successfully navigate the appeals process? Do Medicaid MCOs diligently and substantively respond to grievances? Anyway, you should look at the Office of Inspector General's website in order to determine what it is that they'll be investigating MCOs for. And of course, there's a way for everyone to submit information to the Office of Inspector General. And then there's this group, the National Association of States United, and I don't know what it is, and they have a managed long-term services and supports institute. And they were looking at HCBS workforce challenges in managed long-term services and supports. And this is a March 2019 report. And it's interesting, one of the things on page 13, steps that states are taking to increase or enhance workforce capability. And of one of the many choices, hiring of family/friends. 87% of states are undertaking that. Okay, so finally, I want to complain about the fact that in your board packet is a copy of the Superior Court decision. I believe that is a HIPAA violation. I believe that you have no right to publish that information for someone who is no longer a participant or beneficiary. I will be filing complaints with both the state HIPAA office and the federal HIPAA office. I think this absolutely confirms every single thing I have ever felt about Smoky Mountain Center and Vaya Health. Thank you.
Thank you. This is also the public hearing for the 2019-2020 budget. Is anyone here to speak for that public hearing? All right, hearing none, we'll move to the next item. Conflict of interest disclosure. Tracy Hayes.
There are actually two conflicts of interest I need to make you aware of. Mike Morris, who was here earlier but had to leave, let me know on May 7th that he had accepted as a client a provider called Macon Citizens Abilities, which is a provider in our network. My recommendation to the board and what I told Mike was that I don't believe this precludes Mike from serving on the board, but that he should recuse himself from any votes involving Macon Citizens Abilities or funding for Macon Citizens Abilities. The second conflict, you'll notice later on in the agenda, under other business, item number 2 is Haywood County Property Transfer Resolution, and Ira Dove indicated that he would be recusing himself from that vote due to his employment by Haywood County. So I do need a motion on the Mike Morris issue.
Is there a motion on the floor?
So moved.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, it's unanimous. Thank you. Couple of things to mention for the chair. The Pinehurst Conference is December 4th through the 6th. If you plan on attending, it's better to sign up early. If you want to stay there, especially. And if you contact Christina, she'd be glad to sign you up. Just mention that. And due to the Pinehurst Conference, we're going to need to change our December board meeting or reschedule. Excuse me. If we schedule it the second Thursday in December, how would that work for you folks? Be the following.
It's currently scheduled for December 5th, which conflicts with the Pinehurst Conference, so we didn't want to do that. So we'd be looking at December 12th as an option.
Watch your conflict.
Well, yes, it's not.
Okay, is there another, that date won't work, is there another date you want to suggest?
25th.
Like I said, is there another date you want to suggest?
The 19th would be okay, but Billy can carry my load without the problem. He's done it in the past.
He's got broad shoulders.
Yeah,
So you want to stay with the December 12th?
I think the 12th.
All right, is there a motion to?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. Harold,
So back in December, we gave some of you the opportunity to order to buy a shirt, buy a button down, buy a polo, buy a sweatshirt. Those orders have arrived, and we have those for you, for those of you who ordered. And we've got a number of new board members since December, so we felt like we wanted to make the opportunity, if anybody else who did not get a chance to order in December wanted to order a shirt, there is an apparel order form in your packet, and if you could just fill that out and turn it into Christina, we'll get that order in place for you.
That Christine.
Yeah, that Christina.
One more item I want to mention. At this time, I'd like to ask Jim Holland if he would come forward, please. Sorry, Jim. Jim is going to be stepping down from the board at the end of this month. You're actually going to retire.
I am retiring tomorrow.
I want to read this to you. Presented to Jim Holland, board member, advocate, and friend, in grateful recognition of your service for individuals with behavioral health, intellectual developmental disability needs. Thank you for your exemplary leadership and support.
And thank you very much. Thank you. I really haven't been on this board long compared to other folks, but I've been involved in the health and human services world and certainly involved in the behavioral health world for a long time. And it's something that I think we've all seen and not been as happy and satisfied with the progress that has happened across the state, and not because of the lack of Vaya or the LMEs, but because of what's been placed as the delivery system. But I remain hopeful that we'll be with leadership like here and leadership from the board and leadership from counties that the problem of behavioral health, mental health, substance use, and IDD issues are going to be continuing to be up front and hopefully addressed, and one day that will be something that we take for granted in terms of the care and the treatment of people, just like we hopefully will for physical health needs as well. So it's been a real pleasure. I've enjoyed everything that I've ever done with Buncombe County, and it's a great place to work no matter what you've heard. And as Brian said, I didn't get indicted. It won't be. So it's just been a real pleasure. So thank you all for allowing me to serve with you and to learn from you. Thank you.
Sir, you deserve the fine reputation that you have, is the first thing I would say. And you didn't get indicted, and it just proves the point, right? I haven't had an opportunity to work with you as much as some other folks, but, seriously, you just always come, very highly regarded, just a class, professional guy that cares about the right things. And, I know Christine in particular has had a lot of run-ins with you, and I think she probably would like to recount some of those positive experiences too.
This is a true public servant right here. Absolutely a gentleman who has served his community and the people and so many aspects of it. I think about, I've called you about toilets and buildings and facilities, and then truly about people. Jim always returns a call, he returns an email, he'll let you know. He's just one of those guys that you can just depend on. I know as I have been here at Vaya, and as this community took on the big undertaking of C3 at 356, and what you and others were a big advocate for in the county, not only your financial piece, but your piece about the building and just being a partner. I think that I've said to you recently that there's several people in this community that are like saying the transition of leaders, and you're always one of those people that people talk about when I have an opportunity to talk to the leaders in this community. So, what I know is that you've not only been a loyal servant, you've been a loyal colleague, but you've also been a loyal friend to me. And I think that you've always been very honest. I've loved your participation in the board meetings. You're just the guy that I feel like I can always call, be truthful. You've offered us, not just me, but the organization, a lot of relationship. I think you've been very fair in how you've represented us, and you've been very honest. And I think, like Brian says, that's a wonderful signature to have in the public system. And just for any of us to survive and not be indicted, we all should be real.
Start there.
I think Brian kind of captured the whole thing. But truly, really, just on a personal level, I cannot thank you enough. And I know that people like you, when we have these transitions, we all have an interest of staying in each other's lives. These really great people. So I don't doubt for a moment you'll always continue to be an advocate in your heart. And you'll always be a spokesperson on behalf of people, and we are going to be always deeply indebted to you for that. So thank you very, very much. So,
if you want to come to Pinehurst, what the heck?
Like I said, I've
Join
not
us.
been indicted.
And we're very thankful.
Okay, at this time, report of the Chief Executive Officer, Brian Eagle.
Thank you. Boy, it's hard to remember all the important things that have happened even in the last week, much less the last couple of months since well, actually, we had Finance Committee a month ago, right, for the budget. But it's a very busy time of year with the state budget and the General Assembly being in session. But before we get into all of that, you have some information in your packets about the Care for NC program, and I'm gonna do the highlights and then let Allison talk to you a little bit more about this. This has very interesting roots that go back to a lot of trips that Gordon Simmons and myself used to take to Greensboro, right, Jeannie? And maybe you were even there for some of those meetings. It really started in the early days of the waiver going live in an effort to try to bridge the gap between a lot of the business transactions and difficulties that existed early on between providers and payers. And I was part of I guess the founding group that was the statewide, what did we call it? Statewide provider standardization group or something. I don't know. It kind of wobbled around and it had a lot of different names over the years. And we made a lot of progress. It was a very, very successful effort. And over time, those things kind of come up and down, and it was abated for a while. And then thanks to Karen McLeod, I think largely, said, we need to get back together. So she reconstituted the group and added some members and really put a lot of energy into a common commitment around the system, really, the public system. For better or worse, this is what North Carolina's chosen to do. I mean, LME MCOs exist because of this public effort around managing care. And we have all seen, in some way, shape, or manner, just what Jim alluded to in part, the tremendous challenges that there have been with executing that mission, shall we say. And providers are just, as I like to say, they're in the same foxhole as us, just a little different place. And what we quickly came to agreement around was that if we could bind ourselves together, we could have a powerful message about all the good things that are being done that are, let's just say, always overridden by negative comments, whether it be about services or about money or some political aspect of our business. And everybody agreed, got on board to create a campaign which would in fact do that. And really is a multi-pronged approach. But all 7 LME MCOs, Benchmarks, which is the largest provider trade association, and then the Provider Council, which is another trade association that also represents many providers, just all went in together and said, okay, we're going to really try to do this. And this is what Alice can talk to you a little bit about, and even, Jean, I know you've been part of this. So, Allison?
Yeah, so to what Brian was saying, we have launched what we're calling the Care for NC campaign. And it's a statewide campaign that basically the goal of the campaign is to shift the narrative away from a lot of the negative rhetoric that's out in the media about the LME-MCO system, the managed care system, and to focus more on the positives and the improved outcomes and how we're working in the communities that we serve to improve lives and to really strengthen communities. So you'll see we've started with social media, so we have Facebook and Twitter. If any of you are social media fans, please go look for Care for NC on Facebook and Twitter. We've also sent out the media release, the news release to local media outlets and statewide outlets. So it's gotten some pretty good traction so far. We're also going to be, we've started some digital advertising throughout the state, and we've identified some key markets within the state to really focus in some messaging. But what you'll be seeing here in our communities are the stories, some of the member stories that we want to share that really illustrate how when providers and members and community stakeholders and the MCOs come together, how it can not only improve just one person's life, but it has a ripple effect and it can really help lift up an entire community. So that's what you'll be seeing in the not so distant future. Jeannie, I don't know if you have anything to add from the provider's perspective or not, but
I think you did a pretty good job. Though it is being talked up. We're members of Provider Council, and it also comes up on other associations that we're members of as well. And we talked about it at the PAC, the last meeting, and I think all the providers are engaged as much as they can be. So
it's been, we have weekly calls that we participate in, and one thing that I will say is just the camaraderie and teamwork that's shown on the work groups and just on those weekly calls has really been it's been inspiring to me, and I really feel like we all are recognizing kind of what Brian was saying, you know, the need to come together again and really have a collective voice for that, for a more positive impact.
on the negative and erroneous information.
Sure is, sure is. And of course, you know, part of the challenge when you're the one getting told stories about and you respond, it looks, of course, very self-serving. So it's a much, much more powerful effort that providers are kind of in this together and validating a lot of information, and you can't have any splitting then. So that's been a great, in and of itself, it's a great effort, and I hope it makes a difference. Time will tell. Time will tell. Okay. Let's see. We've had the governor's version of the budget. We've had the House's version of the budget. We've had the Senate's version of the budget. And we've had the compromise budget between the House and the Senate. So it's been a kind of a lot of activity regarding the state budget. And if we look forward from that, you know, what everyone is expecting is that the governor would veto that budget, and that there, as of last night anyway, were insufficient numbers to allow for an override by the General Assembly, which you may note is different from years past. You know, the big dynamic that's changed really gives the governor a lot more authority in his relationship. You know, if you've read anything about the back and forth between the General Assembly, some of the senators, and communications with the governor, you know, it didn't take long for it to get pretty pointed. A lot of the interests of the governor around Medicaid reform. The Senate is kind of no and hell no.
Use the right language.
So, you know, everyone expects the veto. How all of this then kind of steps down to us. You know, as we've been talking, there are a handful of factors that will kind of move the needle, if you will, on our budget. And I know you know, in executive committee and finance committee, you know, a lot of discussion about the budget. Just as we said when we proposed the budget, this is going to continue to be an evolving process and document over time. There are so many unknowns, and each time we meet, we'll give you a full rundown on each of those. For example, as of yesterday, we learned that the stay that some of the plans had filed regarding, you know, what they believed was an unfair grading of their proposals was not upheld. So we can kind of move that one off the list. We heard this morning that the House is working with the department to, I'll say, concede, if that's the right word, a delay around Medicaid transformation in regards to standard plans going late as of something like March of next year as opposed to November. You know, this is just information we have that we can't say for sure that's going to happen because it would require the Senate to agree to it. We do believe that will be in a piece of legislation. How it's acted on remains to be seen, but if you think about the budget that we're talking about, our rates will be changed as a function of the go live managed care date. Okay? You know, our rates that we just agreed to as of last week, Friday, in fact, we're continuing upon a change in those rates in November because of the go live of the managed care plans, all right, in phase one. Well, if that's not going to happen until March, how does that then change our rates? You see how all of these things just kind of stack up? Well, we don't know. But again, I give that as example of, again, one of the big things that's going to move the needle on our budget. And the fact that we are going to, it seems inevitably, go back to square one in terms of a state budget. And that delay of time, what does that do to us? What does that do to us in terms of anything that we would need to implement months into the future but have less time to manage those changes? So you can see that this just gets more and more complicated by the month, by the day, in fact. We were very disappointed to see the compromise budget contain single stream reductions allocated in a way that, well, it took us, I guess, 2 calls with folks and some, I guess, some private meetings with legislators to fully absorb. We can talk about this probably a little bit later in more detail. But suffice it to say that each year, you know, the General Assembly has made reductions in single stream funding. And that is the funding to pay providers for individuals that do not have Medicaid, of which we have thousands and thousands of individuals that fall into that category. We have been required each year, as part of the budget, to supplant that reduction. So in other words, here's the funding level, and they use fiscal year 14-15 as that standard. We're going to take money away from you, and for us it's been 44, 45 million over the last, since 14-15, so this is not small change, right? For those of you that have been with us for a while, you know some of these numbers, you can remember them. Well, each year we've been required to fill that tank back up of single stream using our savings. We had no discretion about that. So it has resulted in, you know, we've published graphs that show how our cash, if you will, is continually going down, 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 down because we're constantly being required to backfill the reductions that the General Assembly has made. So it's been very effective in that it has kept fingerprints off it. So if you're a provider, you haven't seen cuts for the most part in relationship to the budget because we've been backfilling that money all the time. And we have been saying each year, we can't, this isn't going to continue to work. People are running out of money. You've seen the summaries that we provide to you, the days of cash, how everybody's continually going down. You've seen the summaries about the statewide losses in Medicaid of 50, 60, 70 million dollars. You might even wonder if this is a strategy because it is so consistent and so across the board. This is not just a Vaya problem, this is an LME MCO problem. And again, we've provided you with a lot of information to try to equalize that and show just how it's affecting everyone. One of the changes that was proposed in the budget this year, in the budget language, and again, I'm going to keep referring to it as the budget, even though a moment ago I said it's going to be vetoed and we're going to go back to square one, but let's just call it the budget. The provision there was with a reduction statewide of, I think, around $43 million, 36 from the House, about 7.5 from the Senate, and that number changed over time. The allocation methodology, they used two different ways of going about that, and again, we'll talk a little bit more in detail about that. Our reduction was $9 million, which was very much disproportionate, the second largest cut, only after Cardinal. Fully half of the Senate's 7.5 was levied at us. One of the provisions in there this year was an acknowledgement that this mathematically can't continue to occur. People don't have enough money to continually be required to backfill that. So the threshold of 100% of that 14-15 standard was lowered to 90%. Okay, so that we would only be required to maintain service levels at 90% of the 14-15, even though hundreds of millions of dollars have been eroded out of that over the last 4 years. Retain the language around what I call the rebate, which is worked out well for us now for, I think this is the 4th year, Clark, where if the Medicaid budget has a surplus, there is a total of $30 million statewide that is attributed back to LME MCOs to try to buffer the reductions. So that was left in. A new methodology about how to appropriate the reductions and changes in the I guess you could call it the floor. Is it the floor or the ceiling? I guess it's both. Where we go from here is a great question. So we have as a wild card, when is the go live of phase 1 going to be? Is it going to be pushed back? How does that affect our rates? And we don't have a state budget. But the budget that has been proposed has some very serious problems in it in terms of the calculation of single stream reductions. So, as far as the big important news, that would be it. That would be it. And we're really dealing with the big items here. Spent your day yesterday with DHHS. The secretary, we spent some private time with her, Ronnie, and I can tell you she was very complimentary of you in person and the work of your committee, and did announce the findings of the committee, and that the regions would stay as proposed. So she's accepting your recommendations, and that will be her position, I guess we could say.
That's gonna really disappoint Orange County.
And then a lot of discussion about the budget, contracts that we've been working on with the department. Tracy's done a marvelous job with that. A lot of concerns about, and I think I'm talking with both Rick and Tracy on my way back last night. For the first time in the Secretary's voice, she was making comments about, well, if things go late. It was like, wow, I never heard her talk like that before. Because usually it's very much a stiff upper lip about the 18, here we go. They need more time.
There's a big problem.
Hmm?
After talking to some folks today, and on the override vote, of course, the governor's going to veto the budget. But in talking to 3 different ones today, here's what they did, and how does this tie in with us? It's pretty simple. What they did, there's still 80 rural counties. They put millions and millions and millions of dollars in for school construction. 11 million will come to Macon County. Why did they do that? First of all, you got a little history. The state has not went over $100 million in school construction statewide since the lottery passed.
Wow.
Statewide, they've never went over 100 million.
Wow.
We're supposed to get 40%. We're now at 21.2%. So they put this money in there, and some of the folks that was going to that they were really dependent on. So they're going to focus. You're going to hear the focus on that, not on the mental health side. They shifted the focus, and the cuts is even worse than what Brian described if it's passed. Because over the long haul, is it a plan, that committee that we were part of, we pretty much decided that it is a long-term plan. I mean, why else are we going to bid against Blue Cross and Blue Shield in a few years? Are you kidding? So you can look at it, but as far as this particular budget is concerned, as you get to know more, remember this conversation about what the rural schools are getting. First time in history, since not in history, but since the lottery passed, that the schools, now that's what they're going to be focused on. And some of those votes, and it was tight going in, and some of those votes that were going to be definitely with the governor are slipping away. Now that was as of about 2:30. So we'll see where that, but the governor's still going to veto. But to have the votes to override is going to be really close, and that is going to be the reason. And that's, and it's pure, you won't even hear mental health mentioned. It'll be all about the schools, how much money the schools is getting. Well, you know where a lot of that money's coming from? If you dig deeper? From the people that we all represent. So just keep that in mind. That was a conversation with people that would know today. So
I'm sure the sound bites and the headlines have already been written should the override not go through, or the veto, I mean, for that matter, just all the things the governor doesn't support rural counties.
that's right.
The governor doesn't support school teachers. The governor doesn't support, that's how the game's played.
If you're a county commissioner in this room, you know this one can tell you, any county commissioner, Mr. Holland can tell you, there's nothing to put pressure on you like the school. Nothing. And it's going to be the same way in the governor's office with this compromised budget. And in the compromised budget, Brian didn't get it, he didn't get in the weeds about it, but it's really this is the worst budget we have saw. Since 2015-16 budget, this is the worst budget for the folks that we're here spending our time today trying to help. This is the worst. Can it get worse than this? I guess, I don't know, but what it's going to cost in services to our communities, this particular budget and the way it's worded is, and Brian, I don't know if you agree with that or not, just reading But if it's not the worst, it's right at the top.
Yeah, and again, I'm gonna, well, hold that thought, and I think later we'll be able to provide you with some additional information that we've learned as of this morning regarding some of the single stream impact, let's just say. And, I did have a chance to speak to the Provider Advisory Council, both in the general session, where they're always kind enough to let me rattle on, talk about really anything anybody wants to talk about, and then met with the comprehensive providers, and Jeannie was there, of course, representing RHA, the CEOs of all the others, Daymark, Family Pres, Meridian, and Appalachian. Just to make them aware of the likelihood that there were going to be reductions, because and that was before we saw the compromise budget, which actually made it much worse. And I don't know, I'll let you speak to that.
Do you want me to give my report at this point?
Huh?
I can give the back report at this point, because that's basically what we talked about.
Yeah, I mean, I just, and at some point, as I was going through this, I said, well, what are your other provider meetings like? Do the other CEOs come up here and just talk to you like this? And apparently not. So whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I mean, I just talk just like this, explaining exactly what's going on. Here's what the House is doing. Here's what the Senate's doing. Here's what it's going to be for us, and we can't cover them up this year. We can't. And I didn't hear anybody say, what do you mean you can't?
I totally agree with what Ryan said. I think most providers recognize that the funding cuts to single stream just can't continue. And, it does seem like that Vaya gets hit pretty hard with those. We did talk about some strategies that the PAC could do. We started implementing those. I think I spent all week this past week since the meeting working on some of those strategies. We have some calls lined up with the department to express our concerns. We used the talking points that Ryan has in this package here. We've taken those talking points and kind of worked on some rebuttals that we feel that might come about from using these talking points with the legislators. And I sent out an email this week with all of the links to the representatives and the senators in this catchment area and the talking points with the stuff to the providers to start contacting their legislators. As a private provider and as a board member here and president of the PAC, I did send a personal email to each representative and to each senator. I did forward a copy of it to Christina. I didn't ask permission to send it, but I did spend some time talking about how that I sit in this meeting all the time. I've sit here for a couple of years now. Get the financial, when we get the financials for Vaya, we talk about them every month or every other month now, and that how Vaya has absorbed those cuts for the last 4 years now, how many years it's been, and that there just wasn't any money to absorb them this year, and that our Provider Advisory Council, as a council, was meeting together to see how we could continue to provide quality services and still meet the intent of the legislature to cut these state funds. And I said something to the effect that nothing's off the table. We're talking about things that are going to impact your constituents. We're talking about stopping admission to enhanced services for state-funded individuals. We're talking about cutting back on expensive prescriber time. We're talking about closing programs down, like the urgent care centers, things like that are going to impact your constituents. And then, of course, it ended with, please reconsider these funding cuts and the general things you would normally say at the end. Gave them my phone number and my willingness to share more information and talk with them at any time. I'd be glad to share that email with the board if you're interested in seeing it. And I have encouraged all the providers on the PAC, which I know a lot of them are doing. The second strategy that we had was to meet with the chairs of the other MCO PACs, or whatever, network councils, whatever they happen to call them. We've had some contact with all of them now. All of them are interested in discussing this. They're not, as Brian indicated, not getting a lot of indications from their MCOs at this point that they're going to see cuts in services, but they also haven't seen, this was prior to the additional cuts that came down in the latest legislation. So our plan is to have a conference call with them tomorrow, is Friday, I think it is. And then Dave Richard has also agreed to talk with us next week. And what we were trying to do was to take this as an issue, combine it with the transformation, with all the information going out and all that's being added to providers to do, and talk really about how the system is becoming so unstable. They're just going to slow down and start looking at all these things in combination.
Well, I so much appreciate your advocacy and understanding what our position is. I'm glad you're sending those emails and requests to the General Assembly and not me. I guess we crossed that bridge a while ago.
Just a little bit, I think I'm the only one left in here from the west. That's in that way. Duncan Sumter's no longer at Appalachian. Duncan's former member of this board. He founded Appalachian Services. Duncan is no longer part of that. They had all their changes a couple of weeks ago. Nor is Miss Payne, the finance director. Miss Payne has also moved on. So, but Duncan was always a good advocate. He was always somebody in the local in the west we could go to. Of course, now they're owned by Virginia Corporation, but they have been moved up. People that's been there for a while, Tabitha Bradford and those folks they've been stepped up. So we hope that we feel that in talking with Duncan before and after that, it was a little quicker than what than was expected. But just to give a word out for somebody that's a former member of this board, Duncan Sumter has always been a great help to those of us in the West with Appalachian. So if y'all didn't know that, might know Duncan. So.
He's continuing to the PAC and still sits on some of our committees and is contributing as well. So we did meet after the PAC comprehensives, as Brian said, and all of us agreed to go back and look at our current budgets and to see where, because every community is different, and we didn't want to just say, well, we're going to just shut ACT down and all 23 counties. We're going to all go back and kind of see where we can adjust our budgets and see where we can potentially find some savings. I don't know if there's $9 million in it, though. I mean, 5 was bad enough.
Yeah, that's, well, and really, and again, I mean, this is how transparent all this is what we do. I mean, the math is, basically 44 million times, 0.1, so it's like probably 4.4 million. I guess I told you guys 5, so it'll be like good ones, right?
Yeah.
Round it up unnecessarily. And yeah, I mean, so if there's a silver lining in this, that we can get a budget like this, and I can go stand up in front of 100 providers and just tell them all the truth, and they say, okay, we'll help you figure out how to do this. I guess you can call that a silver lining.
The Hospital Association, have they stated a position on the budget?
I'm sorry.
The
Hospital
Association.
Yes, they have. They're very much, even back in the committee on the Medicaid transformation part, they're very supportive of course, Medicaid expansion, not Medicaid transformation, because they can see the handwriting on the wall when it comes to mental health. The Hospital Association knows that this is going to cost them more money. Somebody's going to have to pay the bill. And so they are, you could say that for now, till the pressure comes somewhere else, but the hospital association is definitely supportive of, and they understand. The thing about the hospital association, and as far as that goes, the DSS directors, they understand how the budget was so misleading when it came out of the auditor's office. That was one key element. But the hospital association does understand that, and they have been very supportive throughout, as Brian will tell you, and we just hope to hit, we hope that the dam holds.
I've been surprised at the number of cuts that have already gone into play on the psych unit. Staffing, it's amazing the amount of staff that's already gone. And there's no way that they have enough staff on the 2 units that they have to take care and handle what's going on up there. And I'm there and it's scary.
Well, what Nancy's, of course, is speaking of, there have been a lot of changes at Mission
Oh, goodness.
with HCA, and I think even
It's
last
hard.
They're not positive.
Thursday or Friday was kind of another big deadline for them to make some changes, and it's very different, very different.
People are leaving right and left. They're moving on. They're very miserable, and it's sad to walk in and see what's there now.
I called them over Billionaire and they, era, and they couldn't even tell me who their CEO was or how to decline and call me to look it up on Google.
Well, I'm prepared to just stop right there, Mr. Chairman.
All right. At this time, we go into closed session pursuant to North Carolina Statute 143-318-11A1 in order to prevent disclosure of competitive health care information that's privileged or confidential pursuant to North Carolina Statute 122C through 126.1 or not considered public within the meaning of Chapter 132 of the General Statutes to consult with attorneys pursuant to North Carolina Statute 143-318 11A3, or to consider the qualifications, competence, performance, character, fitness, or conditions of appointment of an individual public officer or employee pursuant to North Carolina Statute 143-318 11A6. Is there a motion?
Can you say that
Motion to
one
go
more
into
time?
closed session, Mr. Chairman, with the statutes as read.
All right, thank you. Is there a second? Okay.
What?
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.